Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today's video was inspired by Roy Blumenfeld, a subscriber with a passion for Civil War humor and satire. Roy and I met in person at our recent tour of Lincoln assassination sites in Washington, D.C., where he shared his interest in cartoon illustrations from the war period and books by the humorists and satirists of the day. You know, those individuals with barbed pens who are responsible for those sharp and often witty, caustic critiques of government, exposing hidden corruption, incompetence, willful ignorance, and hypocrisy. The best of the grand tradition of writing in this format reduces complex issues to comprehensible narratives, challenges authority in subtle and not so subtle ways, and prompts readers to think critically about what's going on around them, sometimes right in front of their faces. Perhaps the greatest measure of satire is its ability to shape and mobilize public opinion and to hold the leaders of a country accountable. One of those satirists is Joseph Barber, a regular correspondent for two New York newspapers, the Times and the Mercury, between 1862 and 1871. His collected columns and writings were published in at least two books. The 1866 volume titled Crumbs from the Round Table, A Feast for Epicures, and the other book, War Letters of a Disbanded Volunteer, embracing his experiences as Honest Abe's bosom friend and unofficial advisor. That one dates from 1864. I want to read to you one of the Disbanded Volunteers' letters. This one is recommended by Roy, which takes aim at General Ambrose E. Burnside's failed assault at Fredericksburg, the broader leadership of the Union war effort, and Abraham Lincoln's response to the battle. This is pure political commentary featuring a mix of criticism, sarcastic praise, and that caustic wit. It is written in particular colloquial style that's common to humorists of the time. Folks like Mark Twain used it and others. And I imagine that this caused guffaws from its readers. I'm not going to attempt to read it to you in its original slang and those expressions. For example, in the Disbanded Volunteer, general is general. Instead, I'll read it without the colloquial touch, with apologies to Barber and to Roy. And I want to play it a bit more straight, just so you can grasp the satire. I've included a link with this post to download the free digitized version from the Internet Archive, one of my go-to places for research. So you can read it yourself and you can do it in that colloquial style if you like. Now, as I read, you listen for references to Burnside and President Abraham Lincoln, the Congressional Committee on the Conduct of the War, Union Brigadier General Robert Schenck, who wound up on the losing side of a minor engagement at Vienna, Virginia in June 1861, another Union General, Henry W. Halleck, a character, Blundersby, the clumsy, incompetent schoolmaster in Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens, Lincoln's cabinet, dubbed the Constitutional Advisors, and Elizabeth B. Wotton Smith, the wife of Caleb B. Smith, Lincoln's first Secretary of the Interior. On a side note, the incident referred to about Mrs. Smith in this writing, in this letter, is described in detail in my book about Civil War nurses and other caregivers. So here we go from Joseph Barber, the Disbanded Volunteer. It's date-lined National Hotel, Washington, December 24th. To the editors of the Sunday Mercury. Here we go. Here's the letter. Burnside may not be one of those irrepressible military phoenixes who know no such word as fail, but he's a moral hero, and no mistake. If he can't take breastworks like Wellington, he can take responsibility like a brick. He lifts all the blame of the Fredericksburg affair from the shoulders of the administration and offers himself as a willing sacrifice to save the president from censure. In this respect, he reminds me of the exemplary Isaac of Scripture celebrity who was willing to have his throat cut for the benefit of the father Abraham of ancient times. The only difference between the two magnanimous individuals is that Isaac escaped with a scare, while there is no let up whatsoever for the unfortunate Ambrose. It must be a wonderful consolation to the nation to learn from the Committee of the Conduct of the War that everything was done for the best. The liberality of the War Department in placing boundless confidence in a general who declared he had no confidence in himself must always stand conspicuous in history as proof of the profound knowledge of human nature possessed by the double team of lawyers at present harnessed to the war chariot of the Union. How pleasant it must be to the people to know that instead of being unyoked and turned out to pasture, they are to be confirmed in the traces and allowed to flounder along the bloody track until they get fairly stuck among heaps of slaughtered heroes, and further progress is impossible. The address of the illustrious Abe to the Army of the Potomac, which is the offspring of his own mighty mind, unaided by any hint from me, dutifully clears away the smoke from the battlefield of the Rappahannock and shows that the slight cheek we received in bucking against insurmountable obstacles was merely the result of one of those trifling accidents that will happen in the best regulated military families. General Schenck, if you recollect, met with a similar misfortune on a small scale when he butted 6 or 7 carloads of soldiers into a masked battery at Vienna at the beginning of the war. Strange as it may seem to the pious mind, a blind reliance on supernatural favor doesn't seem to pay. The providence that shapes our ends only does the polishing off, and if the blocking out is done blindfolded, what is to be expected in consequence but the little end of nothing whittled down to a point? The triumphant manner in which Burnside recrossed the river on the sly is justly considered a great exploit by the president. It was certainly neither an error nor an accident, but the brilliant idea of a superior intellect which, having but no hole to creep out of, had the wisdom not to be above making use of it. The concluding passage of my noble friend's address, where he sympathizes with the severely wounded, is credible to his sensibilities. Also, it shows the originality of his discriminating mind. An ordinary man in his situation would have sympathized with the unfortunate cripples without distinction of persons, but he benevolently selects the worst cases for his affectionate generals and regards, leaving the flesh cuts and mild perforations resulting from the accident to derive comfort from the reflection that it might have been an ill-fired sight worse. It is a lovely trait in the modern father of his country that he never blames anybody for doing anything which everybody sees might have been avoided, nor for not doing anything which was absolutely necessary to prevent accidents. What a happy thing it is for this glorious nation that our chief magistrate's head is not of the same soft material as his heart. If it was, we might find it hard matter to occupy and possess the rebellious South during his term of office. I hope the North is satisfied that the delay of the pontoons until the inevitable moment for leading the army over them to wholesale slaughter was one of those unforeseen circumstances over which nobody has any control. Halleck gave the order to have them sent on, but of course it wasn't his business to know whether it was attended to. As Blundersby, I think that's his name, says in the play Dombey and Son, if so be they were sent, and if so be they weren't sent, why so also. Accidentally, it was so also. Major General Halleck, I would have the public know, has his place as distinctly defined as if he were the head butler in a private family. Now, a head butler, might consistently order the footman to tell the housemaid to leave word with the cook, to send the errand boy to request the ostler, to ask the coachman to harness up the horses, drive the carriage to the doctor's, and bring him forthwith to attend the sick master of the establishment. But if the order wasn't executed and the sick boss died as a consequence, the butler wouldn't blame you. Being circumstanced precisely the same, General Halleck must be similarly excused. It is dreadful to think that some people should be so unrighteously ignorant of official etiquette as to suppose the general ought to have seen that his directions were obeyed. Such things are never done. I hope you will make this fact clear to the vox populi, for, though you will hardly believe it, some folks are inconsiderate enough to lay the blood of the brave men wiped out in the Battle of Fredericksburg at General Halleck's door. As I once remarked on a previous occasion, republics are ungrateful. The constitutional advisors, being of a tenacious nature, intend to stick to the president and their places. They rallied around him early in the week and assured that eminent statesman that they would never desert him. I was not present at the affecting interview, but I was informed that Stanton's spectacles were dim with tears and Gideon Wells's beard quivered with irrepressible emotion. Such is their devotion to my high-minded friend that if every city and town in the Union were to hold mass meetings and petition for their retirement, I scarcely think they would have the heart to tear themselves away. I should like to see the experiment tried, if only to test their patriotism. Christmas pressed rather gloomily here. However, the convalescent soldiers were treated to a first-rate dinner, thanks to the interest taken in their welfare by Mrs. Smith, the generous helpmate of the constitutional advisor of the Interior Department. Hoping that the little accident on the Rappahannock will be looked upon in its true light by a confiding people, I remain, confusedly, yours always, a disbanded volunteer. So there you have a bit of real political satire, real commentary from Joseph Barber, a disbanded volunteer, writing after the Battle of Fredericksburg. So thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.